Good evening, everyone. I'm Lori Robichaud, the Executive Director of Grua Center. It's my pleasure to welcome you to our talk tonight as part of our Good Stories, Well Told series. Grua Center's mission is to engage community via arts and culture, and we do so by presenting a variety of concerts, art exhibitions, and speakers on a wide range of topics. We are now presenting those events as best we can on digital platforms like tonight's chat on Zoom. We usually start with a little housekeeping. Our program director, Kellye Garrett, and I are coming to you from our home offices near where Grua Center is located in Stonington, Connecticut. We welcome your comments to all of us or each other via Zoom's chat feature on our screen. Kellye will be posting additional resources in the chat, as well as, and most importantly, links to where you can buy the books of our 4 authors. We're here to sell books, people. Help them out. We also welcome your questions and ask you to write them in the Q&A feature, and we will try to get to them after the conversation. Our discussion will be recorded and available on Grua Center's YouTube channel in the next week or so. And tomorrow, audience members will get a brief survey that we would love for you to fill out. This is also the time when I take a moment to thank the many people who donate to Grua Center's annual fund each year, and I know some of you are with us tonight. Your gifts are a big part of making our year-round programming possible, and they matter now more than ever during this time of COVID when we can't get together in person. So now onto our talk, and here's the one nice thing about not being able to gather in person. We would never be in a position to bring together a distinguished panel like this one with authors from all over the country if we were doing it live and in person. And they are coming to us from Virginia, Colorado, and New Jersey. But our moderator, Manju Soni, does live in our neck of the woods, and she gave a terrific talk at Grua Center a couple of years ago about her experience growing up in South Africa under apartheid. The book she wrote is called When Lions Roared: How Brave Young People Defied Apartheid. Besides her career in writing, she's also an eye surgeon. So isn't that an interesting combination of arts and science in one person? She's currently working on her next book, a suspense story, and I want to quote from what she says. It's about love, sorrow, and secrets, which is about a county coroner in a small New England town who investigates her husband's hit and run death, but begins to unearth a much deeper conspiracy, which puts her and her children in danger. Oh boy, this sounds pretty cool. Anyway, Manju has recently joined Grua Center's board of directors, and she has worked with Kellye to put together this panel tonight and will serve as our moderator. So I'm going to ask her to unveil herself as we welcome Manju Soni, and we would hear applause. Take it away, Manju.
Thank you, Lori. Oh my God, unveil myself like a statue. Thank you so much. I'm just going to ask everybody else to unveil themselves as well. Kellye and Sean and David. And Kellye too. Hi, guys. And
Hi.
thank you so much. I just want to say thank you so much for attending, for coming, taking time out of your day to be with us and share with us your books and your writing careers and your histories thus far. And thank you to all our attendees for taking time out from their dinner breaks to come and be with us. I made some notes because I'm very forgetful about what to say. So yes, Kellye's going to do questions at the end, and we have a great a treat because we're going to have David and Sean read to us. Kellye is I'm taking a rain check on you when your next book comes out. You are going to have to come back.
I'll come back and just read. That's it.
Yes. Okay, so I'm just going to dive in and give a little bio on everybody, and this is my perspective of them. So, you know, I'm going to give my personal experience of getting to know these guys. So, Sean, I met Sean in 2019 at BoshaCon. And I had the absolute pleasure of listening to him read his fantastic story that won an Anthony Award that year. It was called The Grass Beneath My Feet. And, you know, I don't know if there are many writers in the audience, but writers are people who just virtually spend almost the whole day, like just in front of their computers in a corner. And so when they go to writing conferences, they go there with a mission, usually to get drunk and spend a lot of time with other writers. And so, but Sean was reading to a group of about 60 people in a bar. And as soon as he started reading, you could actually hear a pin drop. So that's how good he is as a reader and how good his story is. His best-selling novel, Blacktop Wasteland, was reviewed by the New York Times as a roaring, full-throttle thriller, crackling with tension and charm. And, you know, he's had the ultimate accolades from the Stephen King, who said he loved his book. So, but Sean's style and tone is influenced by his varied life experiences, which includes being a bouncer, a construction worker, a retail manager, and for 6 hours as a mascot for a major fast food chain inside the world's hottest costume. And we're going to come back to that. I want to know what that costume was. So
it definitely wasn't Chick-fil-A.
So this is Sean's book that I have read. He has many others, but this is the one I've read, and it's fantastic. And I'm going to ask him a lot of questions about this one. So
thank you so much.
Thank you, Sean, for being with us. I'm going to move on to
Thank
Kellye.
you for having me.
Kellye is my hero. Yes, Kellye in 2019 accepted me as a mentor together with our good friend and co-mentor Mia, and she and Mia basically helped me to recraft my book, and through that I got an agent who is at the moment submitting my book to editors. So I'm very grateful to her for her generosity to other writers. She is the author of Detective by Day Mysteries. This one is the second one in the series.
I can prepare.
Yeah, she's got the first one. Brilliant. And so, yes, we're going to ask her a lot of questions about that. The Detective by Day Mysteries are about a semi-famous, mega-broke Black actress who takes on the deadliest role of her life, private detective. And the first won the Agatha, Anthony, Lefty, and independent publisher Ippy Awards for Best First Novel. And the second, Hollywood Ending, was nominated for both Anthony and Lefty Awards. That's this one. And prior to writing novels, Kellye spent 8 years working in Hollywood, including a stint writing for Cold Case, one of my most favorite TV programs. And she currently serves on the board of directors for Sisters in Crime and is a co-founder of Crime Writers of Color. What's that, Sean?
I was just saying, yay, Crime Writers of Color.
And David. So this is David's book, Winter Counts. And I've just finished this. Well, no, I finished this some time ago, and I'm very excited to also be asking him questions about this. He is an enrolled citizen of the Sicangu Lakota Nation, and is the author of the novel Winter Counts, nominated for the 2021 Edgar Awards. And for those of you who don't know what the Edgar Awards are, these are amongst, I would say it probably is the most premier literary mystery award in the world. And he's been nominated for the best first novel. Winter Counts was a New York Times Editor's Choice, an Indie Next Pick, and a main selection for the Book of the Month Club. It was named Best Book of 2020 by Publishers Weekly, Library Journal, Amazon, NPR, Crime Reads, and 10 other magazines. Amazing. He is the Professor of Native American Studies at Metropolitan State University of Denver and serves on the faculty of the Low Residency MFA program at Western Colorado University. So, David's Winter Counts. Welcome, David. Thank you for being with us.
Pleasure to be here.
So we're going to ask a few questions. I'm going to try and basically, vary it up. Little questions about your writing, your inspirations, and then I do want to touch on systemic racism in the publishing industry I mean, I think it's often topics that we don't talk much about sometimes. And then we're going to have you guys read to us. So stick around. I'm going to start light. Do you remember the first mystery novel you read? And do you remember the first time you read one with characters that looked like you? Kellye, do you want to start?
So I think the first mysteries I ever read were Encyclopedia Brown. You know, I think a lot of people talk about like Nancy Drew, but I never really connected with her because she was like so pretty and blonde. She had a Mustang, you know, and a cute boyfriend. But Encyclopedia Brown was kind of nerdy and kind of, you know, wore glasses. I kind of connected more with him. That was like my first time I fell in love with mysteries. Then I discovered cozies when I was about 11, like Joan Hass and Jane Jeffrey. And I think the first time I saw a Black woman, I was definitely a lot older than when I saw Encyclopedia Brown. It was probably around like Barbara Neely with the Blanche White and Valerie Wilson Wesley with her Tamara Hale series. And at that point, I was a teenager, you know, and I just remember, especially with Valerie Wilson Wesley, because I'm from New Jersey and she's from New Jersey. And so her Tamara Hale series, which is about a Black woman PI in New Jersey, not only did she look like me, but I just recognized the places that she went to. Right. You know, so I never had a book that I felt like I connected so much with the character before. And it was such a special feeling. And I think it definitely inspired me to eventually become a mystery writer myself.
Cool. David?
Sure, I'll go. You know, I was going to say Agatha Christie, but when Kellye said that, I read Encyclopedia Brown too, and I love those. I can still remember one that ended with like a giraffe or something. I mean, these things really stuck with me. Good stuff out, you know. And so I loved Agatha Christie later, but I realized my first must have been Encyclopedia Brown, and I didn't think about that until just now, you know. And so yeah, my love of crime and mysteries came early on. But, you know, there aren't a lot of books then or now in the crime world written by Native authors. And so, you know, I had to think about this a little bit. And I happened to bring it up from my bookshelf. I think I can't swear to this, but I think the first Native mystery I might have read, there's a lot of glare here, is by Lewis Owens, the criminally underappreciated Native writer, Lewis Owens. And this book is called The Sharpest Sight. It's fantastic. And so I think that was the first one that I read. You know, there are, you know, since then there have been a lot more, but Lewis Owens was kind of the pioneer in many ways. So thank you for that great question.
Yeah, I'm glad I sent it ahead of time and you had time to and full disclosure, I have never heard of Encyclopedia Brown. I'm so sorry. But you know, no. I come from apartheid South Africa. The Censor Board was very active there.
We'll have to send you a book so you can enjoy it. It's never too late to enjoy Encyclopedia Brown.
Okay, cool. And you, Sean?
In addition to Encyclopedia Brown, which I was a big fan of as well, but the first mystery book that I really connected with as a kid was The Three Investigators. They were a series of books written by in-house authors, but they've been around forever. I think it's about 30 or 35 volumes. They started out being presented by Alfred Hitchcock. He had licensed himself to be a part of the books, and they were about three kids: Jupiter Jones, Pete Wilson, and I cannot think of the third boy's name, Bob. And Jupiter, I like Jupiter because he was chubby, like I was as a kid, and he was poor because his family lived in a junkyard. But he was brilliant, and he would always like kind of wrangle his two buddies into these adventures where they were the three investigators. They were junior detectives, and they were always getting in trouble. And I liked them more than I liked the Hardy Boys or Nancy Drew, because like Kellye, I couldn't relate to Nancy Drew or the Hardy Boys, because the Hardy Boys were like sort of rich kids that were kind of playing at this. The three investigators, like Jupiter Jones was chubby, and Bob had a short leg, so he wore a brace, and their friend Pete was like a good-looking kid, but he was shy, and so the three of them together used to work together and kind of protect each other from their various weaknesses or insecurities. And they also, like, they used to get money. Like they actually would solve cases sometimes to actually get paid. And so I kind of related to that a little more than, the Hardy Boys just kind of doing it for kicks and giggles. But the first book that I remember reading that had a character was a crime novel. It had a black character as the lead. My uncle used to have these books by a guy named Donald Goins, and he was a crime writer out of Michigan, out of Detroit, African-American crime writer. And they were just these really dark, visceral crime novels, but I loved them because they were also so over the top in some aspects. And so, having read so many books by like Agatha Christie and Dorothy L. Sayers and Raymond Chandler and the like, it was for me as a kid, it was really cool to finally meet a character that, if not was exactly like me, sort of looked like me, and sort of came from a world similar. I'm a country guy, but those books by Donald Goins were the first ones where like the black character wasn't a sidekick, and he wasn't a magical black character to help the white hero find himself. And so I really, really enjoyed those books.
That's cool. Yeah. I feel like the Hardy Boys are like, they remind me of the Facebook investors, those Winklevoss twins or whatever their name is. I don't know. These like little wealthy kids running around. I mean, I read them, but I don't know. They felt a little elite. So next question. What's the highest number of rejections you've had for a particular story? And how did you feel when you got your first acceptance of a story? I know Sean has a great memory of this. So let's start with Sean.
So he's going to raise the bar this high, and then David and I have to try to beat it. And with Sean, hello.
No, it's nothing to compete with. Trust me. My first novel, My Darkest Pearl, my first crime novel, and it got rejected 63 times. And,
by agents or editors?
I had an agent who was sending it out to editors at the time, who's not the agent I'm with now. And it was fun. Yeah, I got to tell you the story real quick. So I got with his agent, and it's a good story about an agent is sort of like a friendship or a relationship. You have to fit together. And I was so excited to get an agent, I didn't really stop to think about whether or not we really fit together. I didn't really stop to think about we were on the same page. I was just happy they had an agent. And so the first thing he did was change the title of the book from my title, My Darkest Prayer, to a title that I didn't feel like it worked at all. But he was the agent, so I kind of like, all right, I mean, you know what you're talking about, I guess. And so that book got rejected 63 times. And he would send me the emails. And I'm like, after the first 25, you don't have to send them to me. You just tell me you didn't get accepted.
25 more.
Yeah, it's like, we got 20. We got more to go, son. And so eventually I parted ways with that agent amicably. We went our separate ways. It's not you, it's me. And and then I actually ended up selling the book myself. I met a independent publisher at a Noir at the Bar reading in DC, and they picked the book up and published it. And so, but that wasn't the first time I got anything accepted. The very first time I got a story accepted for money, because I did a lot of stuff for exposure, but exposure don't buy groceries. The first time I got a story accepted for money was in Thug Lit magazine. Todd Robinson was the first person to pay me for a story, and it was like $50. And I wanted to save the check because it was like, wow, this is the first time I actually got paid. But I remember at the time my phone bill was due. So I took a picture. I have a picture of the check at my house. I have a picture of the check, but then I had to cash it and pay my phone bill. So, but that feeling of that first acceptance, it's like, to me, it makes you move the goalposts, because before you get that first acceptance, you're like, man, I just want to get published. I just want to get published. And then it's like, I want to get published in this specific arena. And then, like me, if you're like me, you're like, I'd like to publish a book. And so the goalpost keeps moving. But there's nothing like that first acceptance. It makes all the rejections, it doesn't make it worth it, but it makes it melt away a little bit.
Yeah. Kellye?
So similar to Sean with what became Hollywood Homicide, we were on sub, and submission is when your agent tries to sell the book. We were on sub for over a year with it. And at the time it was 2015, 2016. And my book's a lighter weight mystery with a Black woman main character. And I not very naively thought like, oh, there's no lightweight cozy mysteries with Black women. No one must be writing them. There must be a market for them that's open. And I was so wrong, just that people were writing them, but publishing didn't want to publish them because they didn't think Black people wanted to read about Black people, you know, not having to struggle. And so it got rejected for a year by every major publisher until finally Terry Bischoff she was at Midnight Ink at that point, took a chance on it. And the thing is that the irony is that I had very little edits with Terry. And so this book, which got rejected over a year, got 2-star reviews. As you mentioned, it's won 4 awards, you know. And so the same exact book that everyone said wasn't good enough, you know, once it got published, people realized it was good enough, you know. And I think that kind of, they're never going to say like, we're not going to publish your book because you're Black, you know. And that's the thing about being a person of color, where you don't know what is the rejection truly that my book does not fit for you, or it's not good enough, or is it just because you don't think people want to read about Black people?
Right.
You know. And so I don't know, but it's interesting what happened. So.
I'm going to come back to that. There's a question that I have for that, but yes, it's a thing. David.
Well, I'm going to flip around to the second part of the question here. Y'all get paid for stories?
He's still doing exposure. He's still doing exposure.
I'm still waiting.
You're still unveiling.
Story. I'm not kidding. Okay? I think that's out of the bag by now. So I'm in the Midnight Hour anthology, which is going to be put out by I think Crooked Lane and
Terry.
And I think I'm going to get $150. So that'll be the first time that I've been paid for a story. I'm not, you know, I've published about 5, but they were for like, here's a copy of the journal, you know. So I'm really excited. $50, man. Nice, you know.
You know, the number of hours that goes into writing even a short story, I mean, it's like days, right? If you sit down nonstop and just write it, it'll literally be days, if not weeks. And then you get paid like nothing, or $25 or $50. But go ahead, yes.
Contribute copies are great. That's, you know, I made a nice lettuce salad out of those before. So
for Rejections, I had these free stories. Even those, they weren't paying me, and I got rejected. Nothing like what y'all had, 63, because I got too thin a skin. You know, I got 7 rejections, and I'm like, this story must suck. You know? I put it aside. You know, my 63. I mean, I don't know how you're still standing. You know, they just you know. So yeah, 7 is my limit, and I'm like, I'm a bad writer. I'm done.
So my next question is. I'm going to move on to your books, and basically, these books that I've shown you, because I know a lot more about them than all your other books. So, specifically, what drew you to writing these particular stories and these particular protagonists, and also how did you choose their names? Because I think all 3 of your protagonists' names are cool. So, yeah, that's the question. Who wants to? David, do you want to go?
Sure, I'll go. So, Winter Counts, you know, what drew me to writing, you know, Winter Counts was that I wanted to talk about the social issues in the book. So in my day job, I teach Native American studies. So I don't teach English, okay? In fact, at my school, they have no idea that I write books. I mean, it's getting out a little bit, you know, but I teach, you know. No, I'm not kidding. And so I've been teaching these issues for a long time. But, you know, I write an academic article, like 5 people would read it, you know, and I just felt that I needed to marry my love of literature with the idea of getting some of these political and legal issues out there. So I wrote, what drew me to writing that book, and my protagonist, Virgil Wounded Horse, was to talk about the broken criminal justice system on reservations, because it is deeply broken. And, you know, there are a whole bunch of other issues on reservations that people don't know about, like our religion. We were forbidden from practicing our religion, our spirituality, until 1978. It was criminalized. It was literally a felony offense for us to take part in any of our religious ceremonies. And my students are always stunned by this. They're like, but Professor Weiden, what about the First Amendment? And I say, well, the First Amendment the Constitution doesn't always apply to people of color. That's kind of the first lesson you learn in my class. And so I wanted to kind of get it in there in a dramatic way. So that's what drew me to it. And then to answer your question, Virgil Wounded Horse, obviously I wanted, that's my protagonist's name. I wanted to kind of talk about the fact that he's broken inside to some degree. The book is not just about political issues. It's also about his journey to try to come to terms with his identity. But I didn't sit around and ponder the name. It just kind of came to me in a flash. I think a lot of us do that, as writers, we just kind of act intuitively. So anyway, so it's those two things that drew me to the book.
Yeah, the name has to kind of sound right. But I think specifically on that point is I love the way you weave life on a reservation and into the story. Like it's so much part of the story that you can't differentiate it. If you take the protagonist and make him a white guy, it doesn't make any sense anyway. So that's what I love about that. And that's why I think it's so important to have own voices. This is like, it's so integral to who you are, your experiences, and it's all in the book. But is there a way, like the names of the Lakota people, like what is your name? Do you have a different name as well?
So if y'all can read my name on the screen, I typed out the full name. So my legal name is David Weiden, but my spirit name is Heska Wanbli. It was given to me by a medicine man during ceremony. He went off and he prayed on it, and it means roughly in Lakota mountain eagle. So that's a close translation.
Mm-hmm.
So, but Native people, we often have 2 or 3 names over our lifetime. I don't want to talk too long because I want to give others a chance here. Like, for example, the famous warrior Crazy Horse, his first name was Curly, which isn't, I'm not kidding, Curly, which is not nearly as scary a name. I mean, people had said, oh, here comes Curly. But again, like, not that Curly, kind of a dumb S, Curly just doesn't sound scary, but Crazy Horse, oh yeah, here he comes. So we often have 2 or 3 names, true story, over our lifetime, based upon deeds or honors that we receive. So anyway, thank you for that question.
That's cool. Kellye?
So I was the opposite, where I wanted to just write a beach read with a Black woman who solves a crime for one time. I think that Black people are a little different than Native people in terms of we have a lot of books about our struggles. And I wanted to have a book that wasn't about that. It was just about a Black woman, just doing regular stuff. And so that's where it came from. In terms of her name is Dana Olivia Anderson, and it's Dayna. When I was trying to be cute, and my first titles, I've had like 3 different titles, were acronyms. And if you read Hollywood Homicide, it's still very much about acronyms. And so all my characters, their names are acronyms. And so one is like the one who's the most like over the top is SMH for shaking my head. Her love interest is OMG for like, oh my God. And so the original title was actually DOA. And so her initials are Dana Olivia Anderson.
Like
and
Dead on Arrival.
Yes. And so I don't know, like I have an E at the end of my name, which is not necessary for Kellye. And so I put a Y there that was not necessary for Dana. And it worked out because when I had to come up with the series title, Detective by Day, it worked. But I wasn't like I named her Day to have a cute title. It just happened. I was just brilliant like that. Just happened. So that's where it came from.
But what I love about Dana's stories is like her girlfriends.
Yeah.
And that, I mean, it's such a nice camaraderie, and you see that it comes through all the time, and she turns to them for help, and and they're her resources.
I think that was important to me because it's funny because some of the notes I've gotten about Dana was that she wasn't nice enough because she's kind of, sarcastic. And there was an early draft where she was a bit more sarcastic and ended up giving all the really sarcastic stuff to her friend Sienna. And so I kind of knew I didn't want her to have to be like this really sweet, cozy person who has cats and all this stuff. But I was like, the one thing that Dana loves is she's gonna ride or die for her friends. She'll fight you for her friends, and that's kind of, I don't want to call it a redeeming quality, but I wanted to have that element. So people are just like, oh, I don't like her because she's says sarcastic things, but she also you can be sarcastic and still a nice person. Hello.
Yeah. No,
So
that's what makes her so interesting. She's like absolute, like her snark is
Yeah.
admirable. I'm just like, I'm in awe of it.
Oh, yay. Thank you. So,
Sean.
So
Beauregard.
what originally drew me to all right, I'll get to the name, but I'll tell you what originally drew me to write Blacktop Wasteland was I saw this movie called Hella High Water. It was a great movie. I love it, starring Chris Pine and Ben Foster. And I walked in that movie thinking that it really did address issues that are important to me about poverty and class, but it didn't talk about race because the protagonists are two white men, poor white men in Texas. And I walked into that movie thinking, I want to write a book that talks about poverty and class, but also race, and through the prism of my experience and through the people that I grew up with. And so I grew up in a small southern town. I grew up, we were dirt poor. I've told the story before, but we didn't have indoor plumbing until I was 16. So, I like to joke that when we used to watch Sounder in school, it was a documentary for me. It wasn't just a fictional film. And so I wanted to talk about those issues, but I wanted to talk about them in a way that would bring people into the conversation. So, yeah, I'm talking about race and class and masculinity and toxic and tragic masculinity, but there's also car chases and people getting hit upside the head with wrenches. That's my brain if somebody gets hit with a tool in one of my books. But the name Beauregard, I did that on purpose because in the South, Beauregard is sort of the cliche, stereotypical Confederate apologist name. A lot of old founders of the KKK were named Beauregard. And whenever you see a movie that has Southern characters from the 40s or 50s, there's always some dude named, Beauregard Cullen Jr. And so I took that name and I gave it to an African-American character. And I sort of wanted to reclaim it. And so I wanted people to read it and say, okay, his name is Beauregard. And that's just his name because he lives in the South, and that's just a name that his mama liked. And I kind of wanted to differentiate between what some people think they own and what is the actual disposition of those things. And so there's a lot of people that walk around in the South that think they own this region. And I'll be damned if that's true. And so that's part of the reason why I named him that.
That is absolutely true. I mean, at the moment, I enrolled to Pichuas as a mentor, and our mentee has written a book also set in the South. So it's like To Kill a Mockingbird, but written from a Black family's perspective. And so again, it's that kind of reclaiming because Black people are as much a part of the South as white people are. So
yes. There are so many people that think the South is the sole providence of neo-Confederate apologists.
Yeah.
And that couldn't be further from the truth. My great-great-grandmother was a slave. And, I actually have a picture, a daguerreotype that she took about 7 years after she was free. She was like, I think 11 years old. And, that's just a part of the history of the South. To deny that is to deny the full complexity of the history that we all share. And so I definitely try to talk about that in subtle and overt ways. If you read my books, anybody that uses the N-word in anger always gets their teeth knocked out. So that's an overt way. And then I talk about it in subtle ways too.
And preferably with a wrench.
Yeah.
But I feel like your book is also about fathers and sons, like Beauregard and his dad, Beauregard as a dad. I feel like there's a lot of that. And that really makes it very personal and emotional. Yeah.
It's a big part of it. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Let's move on to slightly, more serious topics. Kellye, on a previous author panel, you said someone shouldn't have to die for people to read authors of color. And I think, at that time, that panel discussion was about there's a sudden interest in reading people of color, and particularly after the murder of George Floyd and the Black Lives Matter protests. And so I just wondered if you could expand a little bit on that.
I think I can't speak for every Black author, but I talked to a lot of them, and I think it was very strange this summer where there was this renewed interest and a commitment to reading books by Black people that you don't normally see unless it's a Black History Month. And so, and it was it was very hard for me because obviously I want people to read my books, and I want people to read my friends' books and other authors of color, especially Black authors. But I don't want you to read it because you feel guilty that America is a racist country and you're just now accepting that. That should not be the reason why you should read my book. I want you to read my book because you want to read a fun book about, a funny book. And if it happens to have a Black person in it, that's great, but that should not be the sole reason to ease your conscience. And so, so that was the struggle I felt like I had, and it also was just a weird struggle where I would have like strangers contacting me just to see how, oh, are you okay? How are you doing? And it felt like a lot of white people finally realize America's racist. And I think everyone here as people of color, we know that that's where the foundation of America, unfortunately, is racism. And so it was just really strange, and I didn't know how to handle that because I understood they were coming from a good place, but also it was just very much like, are you doing that because you care about me, or are you doing that because you want to ease your own conscience?
Yeah.
It's still about you. So
yeah, absolutely. And I mean, so to that, do you think that there's a change the way I think there was a lot of publishers were having to have a rethink,
yes.
right? Also, and
I joke with a bunch of Black women authors. We call it white writer money.
Okay.
Hashtag white writer money. And we want to say because unfortunately, especially there's a thing called Publishing Paid Me that kind of showed the discrepancy of what authors of color got and what white authors got, and including white authors who wrote people of color. Yeah. And so it was like, we want you to pay us what you pay them to tell our stories. And so what happened is a lot of authors were getting white writer money over the summer, and it was great. But my question is, you want to have white writer money, but you also want white writer promotion and marketing. And so a lot of these books, books take a long time to come out. Like books that are being bought in 2020 are will be published in 2022. So I'm genuinely wondering how the promotion and marketing is going to be in 2 years. When the fiend is like, let's Black Lives Matter. Hopefully. Never mind. So I was wondering, I was curious to see what happens with them spending all this money, 6 figures and 7 figures on books, and to see if they're going to actually also spend 6 figures on promotion. So yeah.
How about you guys, David? Do you have anything to add?
Well, I got some questions from interviewers saying, how do you feel about the Black Lives Matter movement? I was like, well, I'm supportive. How could I not be? This is a terrible thing that's happening, and so, I thought it was, anytime there's an interest in books by people of color, it helps all of us, and so, what was I supposed to say? Well, I'm opposed to Black Lives Matter. I mean, of course I was in favor of it. I'm sorry that these people had to be murdered. It was a terrible thing. But I mean, will the change be permanent? I don't know. I mean, I love my press. They were fantastic. I did not get really an advertising budget. Having said that, I love my press. They did great by me. But I mean, if you're in publishing, that the lead title gets the lion's share. I mean, as much as 90% of the marketing money. That's just the way publishing works. And I've never fully understood this business model. Why not have a model where the lead title can get, 50% and maybe split, the rest of it. So for example, I did not get a travel budget. Now, of course, the pandemic wiped that out. But, look, I mean, this is not maybe an issue of color. This is more just the publishing industry has a strange business model where they pick a handful of folks every year and they really get the big push. And so I'd love to see that open up to working class writers of color, everyone. Let's give everybody a shot at getting their books out there.
Right. Sean, any thoughts?
I think the thing that I've noticed is that while there's a renewed or new interest in writers of color, whether that's Black, Indigenous, Asian, Latinx. I also feel like there's this idea that there's only room for a few. You know, I've seen a lot of chatter online, for instance, that will pit Blacktop Wasteland against Winter Counts, for example. You know, and they'll push them like, oh well, here's this writer of color and here's this writer of color, and like, you know, it's like Highlander, there can only be one. And I don't believe that. I don't think that's a healthy or appropriate or sustainable business model. I think the truth that I've seen over the past few years, when you see books like The Vanishing Half or Mexican Gothic stay on the bestseller list, the truth is that, which we've always known it, I think, as people of color, that if you write good books and you get an adequate amount of promotion, people will buy them. You know, I think that if you put the books out there, people, you know, to quote Field of Dreams, if you write it, they'll come. And I don't think people have accepted that. I'll go back real quick. When our Darkest Prayer was getting rejected, I would get these great 3/4 rejection letters where 3/4 of the letter is really glowing praise. And then the last quarter is like, we can't publish it. So they're like, oh, your dialogue is great, and your characters are so alive, and your atmosphere is wonderful, and your setting is unique, but we don't know how to market it. What do you mean you don't know how to market it? That's your job. You got one job. Yeah, I know. Yeah, air quotes. We don't know how to market it. Is sometimes corporate speak for we don't know how to sell it to Black people because we don't think they're going to read. And it's so frustrating as a writer. And the most frustrating thing for me is you'll see books that are equal to your book that will get the kind of promotion that you deserve as well, or books that maybe, let's be frank, let's be honest, books that aren't that well written that get that promotion, they get the machine behind it, and it just crushes everything in its path. And that's the most frustrating thing, because in all honesty, there's an idea that publishing is a meritocracy, and it's not. It's not. And I think if you're a writer, that you have to come to grips with that, because that's tough. And so it's something that I've struggled with now. To speak about my publisher, Flatiron, the pandemic, they had some ideas. They were going to send me out around the country, and things didn't happen like that because of the pandemic. But they did a really good job of getting on, Instagram and getting on social media and stuff, and things happen with the book. But I know that's not the case, and it should be the norm for everyone across whatever publishing house you're with. So I hope as we move forward that this is a paradigm shift, this moment that we're having, and that as we go forward, like Kellye said, to 2022 or 2023, that it's not an outlier to see a book by a person of color on the bestseller list, to get the promotion, to get the spots on television and social media. So I can just hope and cross my fingers.
I want one thing that Sean said. If I had $1 for every non-person of color who says like, oh well, if you're a person of color and you're not getting bought by publishers, your book's not good enough, and they try to just make it that simplistic.
Wait, they say this to your face?
I see they say it on Twitter, because Twitter is that vast the wasteland of like people say whatever they want because they're hiding behind names, and so you see it a lot. That's what they always want to act like, oh, you're just not good enough. That's not what it is, and that's not the case at all. Which is why that's when I have to name drop my 4 awards. I'm like, the book that was not good enough for a year was good enough to get this, And so I think that's so simplistic, and it's so demeaning to just be told that, like, oh, that you just factor it. It's not good enough because it's not that. What is meritocracy that he mentioned? It's not that at all. There's so many factors.
Right. Then actually, I think one of the problems is that the publishing industry doesn't release a lot of statistics, right? Especially with regard to race or who they reject, et cetera, et cetera. So in December, I saw this very interesting article in the New York Times. And this was about, basically, they did a count of all the fiction books published by big publishers from 1950 up to today. And what they found was that only 5% of fiction titles were of people of color. And this is like all people of color. And this was fiction, not nonfiction. and 95% were by white authors. So I think what I was always struggling with was this whole psychological impact of systemic racism. Is, am I just not good enough? You know, I think as an author and generally as a human being, we tend to turn these things internally and we look at ourselves and say, oh, we're just not good enough or whatever. But when you see these kind of statistics, you're just like, okay, 5% chance of getting published versus 95% chance of getting published. I mean, I think that kind of really brings it, very clear, makes it very clear. But go ahead.
So I want to add that Sisters in Crime has something called Frankie's List, which is Frankie Bailey has basically tried to write down, like, to keep track of every person of color or marginalized person, so queer person as well, who has been published in crime fiction.
Right.
You know, and I think I haven't looked at it recently, but when I won my Anthony Award, I literally gave the numbers of each group of people, and I think it was like under 300 total.
Wow.
You know, and I luckily the numbers have gone up since that time, which is a couple of years ago, but it's still like the idea that you can still say hundreds of all time when it comes to people of color, when there's like thousands of books that come out of crime fiction books that come out every year. So it's true definitely for crime fiction as well.
Right. Absolutely. But that brings me to another issue, which is I feel that this applies to systemic racism in every industry, every place, is that what it does is it also deprives people of color of sometimes even earning a living, let's say earning a living through writing. And I feel like it actually, it's like a kind of job reservation in a way. I'm very familiar with job reservation under apartheid. It was very obvious. So to that point, with you guys, like, how do you deal with that, trying to actually make a living out of writing? I think it would be great to do that. Have you managed to do that? How do you do it, if so? And how do you deal with that? Anyone? I feel like a school mom trying to tell you guys to talk.
I guess
so I'm just gonna
I'll talk about it because I used to say in interviews or podcasts or whatever that if anybody can do it, if I can do it, anybody can do it, you know. And a friend of mine, a writer named Eric Pruitt, told me this. He said, stop saying that. He said, because what you do isn't easy. If everybody could do it, then everybody would be doing it. And that's true for David or Kellye. What being a writer is not easy. You know, I think somebody can teach you the mechanics of writing, but they can't teach you how to tell a story. And so that being said, when I first started seriously trying to write, in my 20s, back when you still had to send a self-addressed stamped envelope, I just wanted to be able to get my stories out there. And now that, like with Blacktop Wasteland, it's so interesting to see the opportunities that exist if you've got a good book and a good team behind you, you know, and like with Darkest Prayer, the independent publisher that put it out, Entry Publishing, they did everything they could, but they're an independent publisher, and so they're limited in what they could do. And to see it from the other side with Flatiron and see, when they rev that machine up, when they kick that ignition and they put that joker in gear, you can see how many opportunities. And I have opportunities that have come to me, from that I would never have imagined. I'm working on a young adult novel for, I'm collaborating with somebody. I can't say who it is yet. That's a great opportunity. I'm not bragging about this, so please don't take it that way, but both Blacktop Wasteland and my next book, Razor Blade Tears, have both sold their movie rights. And so
I know, I'm coming back to that.
And so that is let's be honest. I write because I love it, but I like to get paid. I mean, there's nothing wrong with getting paid. And those movie deals have been significant, and they've eased some of the tensions on me. Some bills that I had, I can pay. Some things that I want to do, some things I have to do. And so the opportunities are there, but I think it's 60% luck, 40% talent. I think it's a lot of luck and being in the right place in the right time, but also having a really good team behind you. I got an agent that really, really hustles and kind of pushes me to do things I wasn't going to do. And also I've just been very fortunate that the book has hit and connected with people. And so it does offer me some opportunities to maybe cut back on my day job a little bit, but I haven't completely given it up because I'm also paranoid. So, but, you know, and I think that's an incredible blessing. Right. That to do that, because you know, a lot of people can't. A lot of people don't have those opportunities. A lot of people that deserve those opportunities.
Right.
I can jump in.
Okay, David, go ahead.
Talk about this, you know, and you know, I want to just take it in a little different direction. You know, Manju, what you said. I think a lot of us who grew up in challenging economic circumstances, we have this kind of internalized doubt. You know, I grew up pretty poor. I don't tell the story a lot because it makes people uncomfortable, but there were a lot of times in my family that my mom and I had to sleep in the car. It happened at times growing up, and people don't like to hear it. I can just see them, they kind of turn away. It makes them uncomfortable. And when you grow up that way, when you grow up in this constant economic uncertainty, at least for me, I went to a job that I thought would pay well. So I'm trained as an attorney. I'm a lawyer, although I don't practice anymore, because it's like, oh, they always need lawyers. Because I didn't ever want to end up like what my parents were, you know, which is just poor bill collectors calling, getting thrown out on the street, you know, getting evicted. And so I went to this job that I thought would pay. And it took me a long time, a lot longer than I think y'all, the others here, you know, to kind of give myself permission to write. It's like, wait a minute, I can do this. I don't have to just, you know, make a living. And so I still can't give up my day job. I'm not ready psychologically, you know, yet, you know, plus I got 2 kids that are going to college. So, you know, I need that, you know,
you need a steady income. I feel it's the steadiness of the income, of having a proper day job that keeps you in the day job. You know, writing is not, it's very up and down. So you just never know. And I think you have to be very like comfortable, you know, to be able to say, okay, I'm going to give that up or give up the day job. Kellye, any thoughts?
Yeah, same. I have a day job and I kind of view writing as extra bonus money, you know, and versus live off money. And I'm lucky that my day job is enough that I can do that, you know, and so that's just it's just an extra money that I can use for savings or to pay off a bill, you know, and so that's the thing. And hopefully one day I can do it, you know, and also I don't think people realize it, but they'll be like, oh, like so-and-so got a 6-figure deal. And sometimes it's contingent on something, and the other times it's not. You don't get like you don't like sign a check, sign a contract, and like here's $200,000. It's literally spread out over like years, years. You know, so it's not like you have to also still be able to save and things like that in order to live off a 6-figure deal.
Right, and the tax man, of course, gets his cut.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Taxes and everything. Yeah. I was just gonna make one more comment. David, what David said. Yeah, I totally agree with that. When you live a certain level of poverty, you get poverty PTSD. Yeah. You know, and I remember when I signed with Flatiron, I got my first advance check, and you know, it wasn't 6 figures. I'll say that, but for me, it was still like, okay, I gotta put this somewhere. I can't do anything with this, because when you live in that, like David said, that constant threat of fear of the phone call. Like, oh, is that the light bill calling? Is that the phone bill calling? Is somebody hurt themselves and now we got to pay this medical bill that we can't afford? You know, and so you get to that point where you have to forcibly give yourself permission to dream. You know. Yeah. And I grew up, like I said, like David was saying, and I always had jobs that I felt like were steady money jobs, construction or working. I worked retail for like 12 years. I dropped out of school out of college to help my mom because she was struggling. She had gotten ill. And so it's hard to give yourself permission to dream, and it's hard to give yourself permission to accept accolades. You know, I have a hard time when people will tag me on social media and say, oh man, your book is so good and it's so great. And I'm like, all right, calm down with that. You know, let's chill with that. And so it's hard for me. It really is. It's very difficult for me. And so, because I come from a background where, you know, we used to eat butter sandwiches. And so I get choked up thinking about it, you know, like if my grandparents were here, you know, to see the things that have happened and the things that I've been allowed to do, you know, I can just imagine how proud they would be.
Yeah, I'm sure they're proud of you.
It means a lot.
I think that's a very important thing you're saying about permission to dream, because it seems like you need that. It's not just like being able to go to college or being the first person in your family to go to college, or what, it's something so much more abstract, but without it, you wouldn't be able to do it. So, and resilience. I mean, I see resilience with all of you guys in your stories. So that's
Also,
so important.
representation matters, and it's like it's 2021 and we still have first for people of color, like the first Black woman vice president, and we still have first in 2021, and we still have things that we haven't done yet that will be first.
Yeah, exactly.
And so just to see that, it's hard to imagine you could be something when you don't see anyone like you.
When you don't see it, yeah. This is why I love Amanda Gorman. Oh my God.
Oh, she's amazing.
But that's a whole nother thing. So one lighter question is, if I think with Sean it's more of a reality, but if they make a movie about your book, who do you see playing the role of your protagonist? Sorry, I added this on yesterday just to trick you guys. I didn't send it to you ahead of time. I mean, I know who I'm going to see as Beauregard. I definitely know that.
Wait, why don't you answer for us? Who do you see, Manju? How do you see for all of our characters? I want you to answer.
Well, I don't know all of you, but I know for sure Beauregard to me is Idris Elba. I mean, he's just like so James Bondy. Like, that's him. I want Idris Elba as James Bond, and I want Idris Elba as Beauregard. Dana.
It's funny. When I wrote the book, I actually had another actor in mind. When I wrote the book, I was visualizing Sterling K. Brown from This Is Us.
Okay.
But there has been some discussion about the movie, and one of the names that's come up, I guess it's okay to talk about it. A lot of folks have talked about John David Washington, so that's an interesting choice. But I got one for David, and I've already told him, so he may remember. I want a movie with Gil Birmingham as Virgil Wounded Horse so bad. Oh my God, I want that movie to happen tomorrow. So that's my choice for Winter Count. So.
Okay, we're gonna go with that one. How about Dana?
I'll jump in on that just to Gil quickly here, just to let you know. So, Sean, I've been wanting to ask you for a long time how you managed to get these movie deals signed so quickly. Because I did have 6 studios. I had 6 studios competing for the rights to Winter Counts. And I finally, I can't say anything here. I bet, because we finally came to terms. But I've been waiting months now. And I see you, like every other week, you're like, another $1 million movie deal. Like every 2 weeks you got one happening, And, I've been waiting so I can finally announce it,
That's
the one for Blacktop Wasteland was a long time coming. That was that actually started before the book came out. But then the one for Razorblade Tears, that one that just went so quick. I literally, it just went so fast. So I guess I don't know the specifics of it, but the one for Blacktop Wasteland was a long time. There were people talking, and I for a long time didn't think it was going to happen. So I'm just blown away. But I'm so glad to know that people want to make your book into a movie, David. I cannot tell you, I cannot wait for that. Oh my God, I can just see it in my head. So anyway,
I'm waiting. And for Dana, I have one for Dana.
Okay, who's Dana?
I'm terrible with names, but Rainbow from Blackish. What's her name?
Oh, Tracy Ellis Ross.
Tracy Ellis Ross.
Oh, she has the humor for sure. I never really thought of her. She definitely has the humor element to it. I can see that.
I can see that with the hair. I just feel like I would love to see her.
Dana.
What's that?
I think the problem is that people think that this is Kerry Washington on the cover. Because it's very it's very scandal. Very scandal, with her little blazer on, and she's she's about to take care of fix things. So it's been such a long time since I have wrote the book. I wrote the book in 2014. It's like 2021, and
it feels and with 2020 it feels like it, right?
Yes, exactly. And I haven't thought about this book. I probably shouldn't say that. I haven't thought about this book in such a long time. I think when I started writing it, I always envisioned her as like a LaToya Luckett, who's an actress and a former member of Destiny's Child.
Oh,
And then
yeah.
when it came out, I think her name is Asia Naomi King. She was on How to Get Away with Murder, the Black woman in that. So that was who, back in the day when I would think about these things, that's who I kind of envisioned. But I think you definitely have to have a certain comedic timing to
Yes,
so
definitely.
the Tracy Ellis Ross definitely has that.
Yeah, I like. I love her. So. All right. Well, we're getting near the end. Let me see. We'll go to questions next. But one more question. Kellye, tell us about Crime Writers of Color and and your role in it, please.
Sure. So, Crime Writers of Color is a group of about over 250 people of color who write crime fiction. And it's people from a wide variety of careers, where they are in their career. So one of our co-founders is Walter Mosley, who hopefully everybody knows who Walter Mosley is, probably one of the greatest living writers out right now, and definitely the greatest crime writer. But people who, and also down to people who are starting their first novel. And so when Walter, I, and Gigi Pondian, who's the third co-founder, came up with this idea, we wanted to have a safe space for people of color to network and to discuss things like we're discussing here, like this conversation with four people. This is what we discuss in our group, and supporting each other and networking and sharing opportunities and, cheering on and like, oh, David got this, he got nominated for a lefty, Sean got nominated for a lefty, like let's cheer these on. And so so that was the idea behind it, and it started, I want to say, in 2018 maybe, and it's just grown. And I don't think Walter, Gigi, and I really we imagined how it would be, but it's like we have a website, crimewritersofcolor.com. We have a book site where you can see who has books out by like genre and race, ethnicity. We have a podcast. It's just amazing, and we have a Twitter account, Instagram, and it's great because we founded it, but also I'm not that person who needs to do everything. I don't want to do everything. And so everything we've done beyond founding the group, people volunteer to do. So everything is volunteer run, and it's just amazing. Such an amazing group of people.
Yeah, and I love that it's so international as well.
Yes, well, we're getting there. We're getting there. So
it's getting there.
Yeah.
But just last week, I remember
she brought two people, international people.
A person from Uganda, a writer from Uganda, and one from South Africa. Yes. So we have
and if you are a person of color and you even are thinking about writing crime fiction, go to our website, crimewritersofcolor.com, fill out the contact form, and we will invite you. We operate on a listserv on groups.io, and it doesn't cost anything, and you don't have to have, I think people think you have to have credentials. You don't. Yep. As long as you're a person of color, you're in.
You don't have to prove that you're a person of color.
I asked for a picture. I do ask for a picture. We had a person one time. No, we've had people who unfortunately think that I'm writing about a person of color. So right. I want to use the group to help my research, and that's not our intent. Our purpose is not to help you write your person of color book. And so if you're not a person of color, so I do try to. I'm like, do you have a LinkedIn I could look at, or a website? But it's very lax. So
that's cool. Well, I think we're going to move on to questions. Kellye, questions from the audience? Are there any?
Hello, everyone.
Hi,
let's see here. We don't have any questions yet. Oh, here we go. Felicia asked, what was your catalyst to start writing? Does anybody want to take that one? How about Sean?
So I started writing because I annoyed my mom. My mom would read me stories when I was like a little kid, 5 or 6 years old, and I always would point out the plot holes in fairy tales. And it's like, so she would get annoyed with me about it. If I was reading, I was like, how does the wolf fit in the chimney? And how does Red Riding Hood grandma stay alive in his stomach? That doesn't make any sense. And one night she was very frustrated. She's like, you know what? Just write your own stories. And I started scribbling my own little stories. And it just clicked something in me where I really enjoyed doing it. And I grew up around a lot of backyard raconteurs, my uncles and aunts and cousins. If you come to a Cosby family get together, you have to be able to think quickly on your feet because we tease and cut each other all the time. So if you're sensitive, do not come because you're gonna get your feelings hurt. So all of that is a part of what started me in writing.
Anybody else want to answer that?
So I was 5 years old and I told my parents I wanted to be a writer, write books, and they were like, "Go for it," and so I would start stories and I would never finish them. Like my mother has a whole notebook of me just starting stories. And still to this day, I will start a story. The struggle is to finish it. I've always had great ideas. So that's the thing. And I've been lucky where I've been a professional writer in some capacity my entire career. So over 20 years, I've been everything. I've been a journalist. I've been a TV writer. I was a technical writer for like 2 weeks. I hated it. Now in my day job, I do communications writing. So I've been very lucky that that's how I make my living. So.
Do you still have some of your old notebooks from when you were writing?
We still have it. It's somewhere in my mother's house, and one day I'll get brave enough to actually like look at it and see what the stories were. But literally, there are probably like 20 of them, just first chapters.
Wow. So. And how about you, David?
Well, like the others here, I started writing in second grade. I can still remember the first short story I ever wrote. And I was so excited. And I got such a thrill because everybody in the class loved it. And it just planted something in there that unfortunately took decades to bloom. Because I have, like Kellye, I have been a writer. I have, believe it or not, a book out on the U.S. Supreme Court. Please, nobody buy it. It's god awful. Okay, I mean, it's scholarly work. Look, if you want to learn about the procedures of the United States Supreme Court, this is the one. Okay, but I don't think anybody does. So I've always been writing, in law. I wrote briefs and all that, but it wasn't until about 15 years ago that I said, you know what, I'm going to go back and do what I love, and the consequences be damned. So I meant getting up at 5 a.m. every morning and just trying and doing this craft and slowly getting better, and so slowly. So anybody that's watching, just keep at it. It comes. It just takes time and practice and effort.
Yeah.
Thank you all. And we have a question from my colleague, Lori. So you can come on camera, Lori, and ask your question.
I'm just so delighted by this conversation, and I've been laughing and crying. So we know it's a good thing when you move us in the other way. I came up in the theater, and I've spent some time in Hollywood, and I'm intrigued by the three of you who have had experience in that arena, or it's coming up. I'd like you to talk about your filter system, and that might be with just as a writer, if you're working with an editor, or if you're, looking at Hollywood, you may just take the money and run, but you might be involved in developing the piece, which means you'll be working with a director or a showrunner. How have you developed a filter system? And it might even be, people, when writing is such a solitary art form, when you give it over to someone, how do you know who to believe and listen to? And could you talk a little bit about that process? Go ahead.
I'll start that. For me, I love my family, but I don't listen to them about my writing because they're never going to tell me the truth. Like, my mom right to this day, it's like everything I write is a masterpiece. It's all Shakespeare.
There's no plot holes. There's no plot holes in it.
Yeah, exactly. This is great. You can end a sentence with a preposition. Who cares? But I have friends that I start with. I bugged my friend Kellye a lot when I was writing Blacktop Wasteland. And I have another friend named Nikki Dolson, who's a great writer. Poor Nikki, I bugged her to death. But as far as the editorial process, I used to be really, really, really sensitive about the editorial process. I didn't want to kill my darlings. I wanted to wrap them in bubble wrap and keep them safe. And so, but as time went on, I've gotten very mercenary about that because I've learned that there are certain hills that there's certain lines that you have to draw, and there's certain things you got to let go. And, if you can let something out of your work and it doesn't affect the overall narrative, then it doesn't need to be there in the first place. Yeah. And so I've gotten way more diplomatic and judicial about that as time goes on. As far as the movie stuff goes, I was talking to the movie people, and they wanted to know if I wanted to like work on the screenplay or nothing. But I ascribe to the Dirty Harry philosophy on that. A man got to know his limitations. So I know my limitations. I think I'm a pretty good short story writer. I think I'm a decent novelist. I think I'd probably be a crappy screenwriter, so I'm going to let that go with somebody else. But I tend to work pretty well with editors and folks who are honest with me. I've developed a pretty thick skin. 63 rejections will make you develop a thick skin.
Kellye, you worked in Hollywood.
Yes, and so that was an experience where it was very collaborative, and working on a cold case, it was not my vision. We had a lot of input from other writers. We had input from the network and from the studio, and so I was definitely like a paid hack, if you will. With my books, I'm a bit more like, this is mine, and I'm a bit more, not put my foot down, but I trust myself most. At the same time, though, I want to have the best book that I can have, and I know by myself I cannot have that, and so I have people who I ask, who read, who I trust, like including my agent, including my editor. I trust them, and I know that we all have the same goal to make the best book, and they also know it's my vision. And so if I strongly don't agree, it's going to be me. It's going to be what I want to do, but it's very rarely I strongly disagree. I like to just talk about it with them and like, okay, well, this is what you think. So let's discuss a way to, make us both happy and figure out how I can address the issue that you have, but in a way that makes me happy, that I feel is still true to my story. So that's my process. And also it's like, Sean, pick your battles. Like I just had a note where my editor was like, I had talked about a credit card. She's like, well, the credit card would be expired at this point, and it should be only like, she only got it last year, not 3 years ago. And I was just like, you know what? No, I don't care about that. I'll change the dot. When she got the credit card, like, I don't care. Like that's like the type of battle. But I know there's some authors who think every word they write is just like God, and like it can't change anything. But that's not me.
How about you, David? Did you want to answer that?
Sure. I mean, so I think it's important to have a group of people you trust. So for me, my first reader is almost always my partner, who's the native writer, Erica Worth. So we have this two-writer household. And so that's an interesting dynamic because we share each other work. But, when it's your partner, if something's not working, you have to say it, but you have to say it in a nice way. So, she will nicely say, yeah, Dave, this scene, it stinks, it sucks, it go put it in the garbage, No, she's a lot nicer than that. And then I, like everybody else here, I trust my agent. I love the editors I've worked with. I had the privilege of working with Zach Wagman at Echo, who's now at Flatiron. Yeah. And now I have the privilege of working with Helen Otzma at Echo. She's fantastic. So I do trust my editors because I get very tied into certain issues and they can see and just kind of let me see my blind spots. As far as movie stuff, I'm with Sean. I'm just, if I get the opportunity, I'm just going to hand that over. I think they're going to make me a creative consultant, which I think is like coffee dude, so I'm going to coffee in. So that's how I see it playing out.
Well, we have a last question here from Jim. It's for Sean. He says, most mysteries start with the crime happening in the first pages and the rest of the book is about solving it. In Blacktop, there's a lot of narrative leading up to the event. What made you choose that approach?
I wanted to immerse the readers in my character's world first so that I gain sympathy for the brutality that he executes upon people later. I want you to like Beauregard, so by the time he, breaks somebody's teeth with a wrench or he breaks somebody's hand or you are going to be more accepting. It's like, oh, that's terrible, but he's such a nice guy. He's so cool. And so I wanted people to really buy into him as a character first. But I kind of flipped the script halfway through because there's certain things that happen that make him confront his own hubris. And so by that point, now you're worried about him. You're scared for him because the tragedies that pile up have an effect on you because you bought in to him as a character. So that's why I did it. My next book coming out is totally opposite. I did the traditional crime happens and then everything else. But for this, I really thought it was important that people really identify with him as a character that they want to see succeed.
Yeah, and I think you succeed with that. I understood Beauregard. Like, even if you don't always like certain things that he does, you understand him and you understand his family, and you realize that this man is trying to do the best he can under the circumstances. And so I think that's really important. Go ahead.
A good friend of mine who's a writer, Michael Cordia, said that Beauregard is a good man doing bad things for the right reason. So
right. Exactly. Yeah. All right, Kellye, are we done with the questions?
We are done with the questions, yes.
Okay, shall we do a quick reading? David, do you want to start?
Did you say me?
Yes.
Sure, I'll be happy to. I'm just going to read a page and a half here, folks. So I won't, I don't need to do a lot of big setup. So this is from Winter Counts. And just the setup is the protagonist, the voice you're hearing is Virgil Wounded Horse, who's a hired vigilante on the Rosebud Reservation. So he beats up people that can't get justice. But his nephew has overdosed on heroin. And so in this scene, he is waiting in the hospital to find out if his nephew, whom he takes care of as a father figure, is going to live or die. So I'm just going to read a page and a half here of Virgil kind of ruminating on things as he's waiting to find out if the person that he loves most in the world is going to make it. Hours passed while I waited for Nathan to wake up. I tried to stop my mind from going to dark places, but images of my nephew as brain damaged crowded into my head. I was proud of him, his intelligence and his curiosity and his fierce defense of music I hated. It was breaking my heart and spirit to imagine that these parts of him might be gone for good. And then I started to obsess over things that Nathan had done that might have tipped me off to hard drug use. Had he been acting strangely? Maybe I should have searched his backpack and phone. I gave up trying to stop this parade of images, and I just sat with my fear and my guilt. The window in the hospital was murky, like it hadn't been washed in years, but I could glimpse the russet hills and rolling prairie of the reservation outside in the dying light. Back in the time before Columbus, there were only Indians here, no skyscrapers, no automobiles, no streets. Of course, we didn't use the words Indian or Native American then. We were just people. We didn't know that we were supposedly drunks or lazy or savages. I wondered what it was like to live without that weight on your shoulders, the weight of the murdered ancestors, the stolen land, the abused children, the burden every Native person carries. We were told in movies and books that Indians had a sacred relationship with the land, that we worshiped and nurtured it. But staring at Nathan, I didn't feel any mystical bond with the res. I hated our shitty unpaved roads and our falling down houses and the snarling packs of dogs that roamed freely in the streets and alleys. But most of all, I hated that kids like Nathan, good kids, decent kids, got involved with drugs and crime and gangs because there was nothing for them to do here. No after-school jobs, no clubs, no tennis lessons. Every month in the Lakota Times newspaper, there was an obituary for another teen suicide, another family in the Burn Thigh Nation who'd had their heart taken away from them. In the old days, the Ayapaha was the town crier, the person who would meet incoming warriors after a battle, ask them what happened so they wouldn't have to speak of their own glories, and then tell the people the news. Now, the Ayapaha, our local newspaper, announced losses and harms too often, victories and triumphs too rarely. Why didn't I leave? People here always talked about going to Rapid City or Sioux Falls or Denver, getting a job and making a clean break, putting aside native ways and assimilating, adapting to suburban life. But I thought about the sound of the drummers at a powwow, the smell of wild sage, the way little native kids looked dressed up in their first regalia, and the flash of the sun coming up over the hills. I wondered if I could ever really leave the reservation, because the res was in my mind, a virtual res, one I was seemingly stuck with. And then I fell into a half sleep, immersed in fugue dreams and transient thoughts, images of Indian children dancing in my head.
That book is so good.
Sean.
All right. I'm going to read from I'm going to read actually from my next book that comes out this summer, Razor Blade Tears. I'm going to read the first chapter, and that's really short, so I might read a little bit of the second chapter. But here we go. Chapter 1. Ike tried to remember a time when men with badges coming to his door early in the morning brought anything other than heartache and misery. But try as he might, nothing came to mind. 2 men stood side by side on the small concrete landing of his front step with their hands on their belts near their badges and their guns. The relentless June sun made the badges glimmer like gold nuggets. The 2 cops were a study in contrast. One was a tall but wiry Asian man. He was all sharp angles and hard edges. The other, a florid-faced white man, was built like a power lifter with a massive head sitting atop a wide neck. They both wore white dress shirts with clip-on ties. The power lifter had sweat stains spreading down from his armpits that vaguely resembled maps of England and Ireland, respectively. Ike's stomach did a turgid somersault. He was 15 years removed from Coldwater State Penitentiary. He had bucked the recidivism statistics ever since he walked out of that festering wound. Not so much as a speeding ticket in all those years. Yet here he was with his tongue dry and the back of his throat burning as the 2 cops stared down at him. It was bad enough being a black man in the good old US of A and talking to the cops. You always felt like you were on the edge of some imaginary precipice during any interaction with an officer of the law. And if you were ex-con, it felt like that precipice was covered in bacon grease. Yes, Ike said. Sir, I'm Detective LaPlata. This is my partner, Detective Robbins. May we come in? What for? Ike asked. LaPlata sighed. It came out low and long like the bottom note in the blues song. Ike tensed. LaPlata glanced at Robbins, and Robbins shrugged. LaPlata's head dipped down, then he raised it again. Ike had learned to pick up on body language when he was inside. There was no aggression in their stances, at least not any more than what most cops exuded on a normal 12-hour shift. The way LaPlata's head had dropped was almost sad. Sir, do you have a son named Isaiah Randolph? LaPlata said finally. That was when he knew. He knew it like he knew when a fight was about to break out in the yard, like when he knew a crackhead was going to try and stab him for a bag back in the day, like he just knew in his gut that his homeboy Luther had seen his last sunset that night he'd gone home with that girl from the satellite bar. It was like a sixth sense, a preternatural ability to sense a tragedy seconds before it became a reality. What's happened to my son, Detective LaPlata? Ike asked, already knowing the answer, knowing it in his bones, knowing that his life would never, ever be the same. That's it.
Wow. That was fantastic, both of you. Can you hear me? I feel. Oh.
I can hear you.
Oh, good. Yeah, I like poetic, man. I don't know. And Kellye, rain check, next book, definitely. So, okay, we're very much, on time. So thank you guys. I just want to say thank you for coming out, taking your time out and being with us. Yeah.
Thank you for organizing this. It was an amazing, fun night. I learned a lot about both these guys, and I know Sean at least pretty well. So thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. And I sometimes like we're all meeting up with these book readings and all of that, but we don't always meet up with the same people. So I think it's also great and fantastic treat for our audience. So thank you as well.
So let me conclude on behalf of the Grua Center. Thank you so much, Manju, for bringing us these 3 extraordinary artists and helping us expand our horizons and hopefully our bookshelves. I'm ready to go out and put the credit card down. And to Sean and Kellye and David, thank you so much for sharing your stories and your personal stories with us. We are just delighted to learn more about you and your work. And we thank our audience for being with us. We'll be sending you out an evaluation tomorrow, just a quick one, if you would let us know what you thought. So that'll help us as we go forward. So once again, thank you for spending this evening with us, and everybody stay safe, and thank you and good night.
Good
Bye-bye.
night. Bye, guys.
See you guys. Bye.
Bye-bye, everybody. Thank you.